It was still dark when she opened her eyes. Not yet dawn. The oil lamp on the stone ledge had burned out hours ago. The small house was completely silent. Joseph was sleeping on the mat on the far side of the room. The cooking fire in the courtyard was cold ash. The neighbor's rooster had not started yet. But Mary was already awake. She lay on her sleeping mat in the soft gray dark, and she listened to her son breathing. He was sleeping on the small mat in the corner, the same mat he had slept on every night of his life. His breathing was deep and even. His arm was thrown across his face the way it had been when he was 3 years old. His feet were almost hanging off the edge of the mat now. He had grown so much in the last year. Today was the day. Today her son was turning 13 years old. And in the Jewish world of first century Nazareth, that meant something specific. Today, Jesus would become a man, not a boy who would one day be a man. Today, under Jewish law, by the rising of the sun this morning, the small boy sleeping in the corner of her house would legally and religiously become a bar mitzvah, literally, in Aramaic, a son of the commandment, a full member of the covenant, old enough to read from the Torah at the synagogue, old enough to be held accountable for his own actions before God, old enough to start walking out of her house. This is the morning Mary realized her son was almost gone. Built from Jewish law, from first century Galilean culture, and from the archaeology of Nazareth itself. By the end of this video, you will understand why this was the most quietly painful morning of her entire life, and why every mother of a 13-year-old who has ever lived knows exactly what she was feeling. She did not wake him. She rolled quietly off her sleeping mat. She did not light the oil lamp. She wrapped her cream-white linen head covering around her hair the way she did every morning. She tied her dusty rose tunic at the waist. Then she walked silently across the packed earth floor and knelt beside her son's sleeping mat. He did not stir. His face was completely peaceful. The 13-year-old boy who had eaten her bread, played in her courtyard, learned the Shema at her knee, walked beside her to the well of Nazareth 1,000 times. His dark hair was tangled from sleep. There was a small smudge of stone dust on his cheek from working in Joseph's workshop yesterday. His hands were starting to be a man's hands, calloused, broader, stronger than they had been 6 months ago. She placed her right hand very gently on his head. She had been doing this every morning of his life. The blessing every Jewish mother whispered over her sleeping children. The same blessing her own mother Anne had whispered over her in Nazareth when she was a girl. The same blessing every Jewish mother in Galilee was whispering over her sons that exact same morning. May God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Her hand rested on his hair. She did not weep. The boy did not wake. The neighbor's rooster started crowing in the courtyard next door. And then she lifted her hand. Because in the Jewish tradition of her people, this was the last morning she would say that blessing over him as a boy. Tomorrow morning, when she woke and walked to his mat, she would be looking at a man. She walked out into the courtyard. The air was cool. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, pale silver behind the hills of Galilee. Smoke from one of the neighbor's chimneys was rising straight up in the still air. She knelt at the courtyard oven. It was made of clay, round, domed, about the height of her knee. She had built it herself 11 years ago when she and Joseph had moved back into this house after Egypt. She knew every crack in its walls. She placed the dry olive branches inside. She struck the flint against the iron the way Joseph had taught her on their second morning of marriage. The sparks fell. The kindling caught. a small orange flame began to glow. She fed it slowly. Larger branches, a few small pieces of dried sycamore wood she kept stacked under the eave. Then she walked back into the house, to the storage corner. She pulled out the small clay jar of barley flour. She measured out 2 cups by hand, the way her grandmother had taught her. She added a pinch of salt, a little olive oil, cool water from the clay pitcher. She kneaded the dough on the wooden bench. Her hands worked automatically. She had been kneading bread every morning of her married life. The motion was so familiar, she could do it half asleep. But this morning, her mind was somewhere else. This morning, her mind was 13 years ago. To the cave in Bethlehem, to the toddler in Egypt, to the 3-year-old who had learned to say her name, to the 7-year-old who had asked her why the stars hang in the sky, to the 10-year-old who had cut his hand on a chisel in Joseph's workshop and cried into her shoulder. All of those boys were gone now. Only the bar mitzvah remained. The sun broke the horizon. Mary watched it climb above the hills east of Nazareth. She set the kneaded dough into a small wooden bowl. She covered it with a cloth to let it rise. She heard Joseph stirring inside the house. Her older husband, the builder, the quiet man the priests had given her when she was 12 years old. He had been with her on every one of these birthdays for 13 years. He was almost 60 now. His beard was fully gray. His hands were knotted from 40 years of cutting stone and wood. He walked out into the courtyard. He saw her sitting on the low stone bench by the well. He saw the wooden bowl of dough rising on the bench. He saw the fire glowing in the oven. He saw her face. He did not say anything. He walked over. He sat down beside her on the stone bench. He took her hand in his calloused one. He did not look at her. He looked at the same sunrise she had been looking at. They had been married for 14 years. He knew exactly what this morning was. He had been a Jewish boy himself once. He had become a bar mitzvah in a synagogue in Bethlehem when he was 13. He remembered his own mother, long dead now, sitting up before dawn that morning, making bread. Joseph squeezed Mary's hand. He said, "He's almost a man." Mary said, "I know." Joseph said, "Are you ready?" Mary did not answer. She watched the sun come up. She squeezed his hand back. Then she stood up and went to wake her son for the longest morning of her life. She knelt beside his sleeping mat the way she had been doing every morning of his life. She put her hand very gently on his shoulder. She said his name, the same way she had said it when he was a baby in the cave in Bethlehem, the same way she had said it when he was a toddler in Egypt, the same way she had said it every morning of his 13 years on this earth. He opened his eyes. For one fraction of a second, he looked at her the way he had been looking at her his whole life. The sleepy, complete trust of a child waking to his mother's face. Then his eyes focused. He remembered what today was. He sat up. Mary looked at her son. She saw the boy he had been. She saw the man he was becoming. She saw both at the same time. The first beard hairs on his upper lip. The broader shoulders he had grown in the last 6 months. The hands that were starting to be a builder's hands, like his father's. But also, the smudge of stone dust still on his cheek. The way his hair was tangled the same way it had been when he was 4. He smiled at her. She did not weep. She would not weep this morning. She had decided that yesterday. Today was his day. She said, "Good morning, my son." He said, "Good morning, Mama." Then he stood up, and the boy who had been her child for 13 years walked out of the house to wash his face for the first time as a bar mitzvah. She baked the bread. She set out olives in a small clay bowl, olive oil for dipping, dried figs, a small cup of goat milk. The exact same breakfast she had made him every morning of his life since he was old enough to eat solid food. But this morning she added one thing: a small portion of honey on a piece of warm flatbread. Honey was rare, expensive, reserved for festivals and weddings. Mary had been keeping a small clay jar of it on the high shelf for over a month, waiting for this morning. Because in the Jewish tradition of her people, honey was given to a boy on the morning of his bar mitzvah. It was a symbol. The Torah was sweet. The boy was about to take on the responsibility of obeying it. The sweetness of God's law, the sweetness of becoming a man under the covenant. Her son walked back into the courtyard with his face washed and his hair combed. He saw the honey on the bread. He looked up at her. He did not say anything, but she saw it in his eyes, the recognition. He knew what the honey meant. He knew what today was. He had been studying for it for months. He had been memorizing his Torah portion with the village rabbi for over a year. He sat down at the low wooden table. Joseph sat across from him. Mary sat at the head of the table. Joseph said the blessing over the bread. "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth." Then the three of them ate. When breakfast was finished, Joseph went to the storage trunk. He pulled out a small folded piece of woven wool, white with blue stripes. It was a prayer shawl, a tallit. Joseph had been weaving it for his son for the last 6 months, working on it late at night after Jesus had gone to sleep, adding the blue threads by lamplight, tying the knots in the corners, the tzitzit, exactly the way Jewish law required. He had finished it 3 days ago. He unfolded it now in the courtyard. He shook it out. He walked over to his son. He draped it carefully over the boy's shoulders. He said, "This is yours now." Mary watched her son receive his first prayer shawl. She did not weep. The boy adjusted the shawl on his shoulders. He pulled the corners forward the way he had seen Joseph do it 1,000 times. He touched the tzitzit knots. He stood up straighter. He looked at his father. Joseph nodded. Then the three of them walked out of the courtyard onto the dirt road that led through Nazareth to the small village synagogue at the top of the hill. Mary walked behind them, not because Jewish custom required it, though it did on this particular morning, but because she wanted to see them, her husband, her son, walking together up the same street they had walked 1,000 times before. The small boy now wearing the prayer shawl of a man, the older builder beside him with his hand on his shoulder. The whole village was on the street. Women in doorways, men leading donkeys, children running. The morning of a bar mitzvah was a public event. Everyone in Nazareth knew it was Jesus, the carpenter's son's day. She walked behind them and she watched. She thought, this is what every mother of a son sees, eventually. The back of her child walking away from her into a world that is going to claim him. The synagogue of first-century Nazareth was a small stone building, excavated in part by archaeologists from the Israel Antiquities Authority. Limestone walls, a single room with stone benches along the perimeter, a raised platform at the front, the bima, where the Torah scrolls were read. It could hold perhaps 50 people, the whole adult male population of Nazareth. Mary did not enter the main room. As a woman, she sat in the small side area, the women's section, separated from the men's section by a low stone partition. She could see through. She could hear everything. Her son was called forward. The village rabbi, a man Mary had known since she was a girl, said the words she had been preparing to hear for 13 years. Will Yeshua bar Yosef come forward to read from the Torah? Jesus stood up. He walked to the bima. He climbed the 3 small stone steps. He stood in front of the open Torah scroll. The rabbi handed him the silver pointer, the yad, used to follow the Hebrew text without touching the parchment. Mary watched her son from the women's section. She held her breath. Jesus opened his mouth, and he began to read. His voice was clear, steady, slightly higher than a man's voice. He was still 13, but the Hebrew was perfect. Every syllable, every cantillation mark, every pause where his teacher had told him to pause. He was reading from the prophet Isaiah. Mary did not know yet that 30 years from now, in this exact same synagogue, in front of these exact same village men, her son would stand on this exact same bima and read from this exact same scroll of Isaiah. And he would say words that would change the world. She just knew that this morning, his voice was strong. His Hebrew was perfect. His prayer shawl sat correctly on his shoulders. Her son was a man. After the service, the men of Nazareth came up to congratulate him. They shook his hand. They put their hands on his shoulders. They called him by his full Hebrew name, Yeshua bar Yosef. They told him he had read beautifully. Mary stood in the doorway of the synagogue. She did not go in. She waited. After a long time, perhaps an hour, Joseph and her son walked out of the building. The other men had gone home. The midday sun was high overhead. Her son walked toward her. He was still wearing his prayer shawl. He looked at her. He said, "Mama, I did it." Mary smiled. She put her hand very gently on his cheek the way she had a million times. She said, "Yes, you did, my son. You did beautifully." He smiled at her, the same smile he had smiled when he was 3 years old and had brought her a flower from the courtyard. The same smile, the same boy. But the prayer shawl on his shoulders was the prayer shawl of a man. The 3 of them walked home together, down the dirt road, past the houses of their neighbors, to the small stone house where her son had grown up. Mary walked beside him now, not behind him, because that morning was over. The transition was done. He was a man now. She was his mother, but she was no longer the only person responsible for raising him. From this morning forward, he belonged to the covenant, to the community, to God himself. She had given him back, the way every Jewish mother eventually has to. That afternoon, Joseph took the bar mitzvah boy to walk through the village. It was tradition. The new man visited every adult male in his village. He shook their hands. He thanked them for being part of the community he was now joining. The visits would take hours. Joseph would lead him. Mary stayed home. She washed the breakfast dishes in the courtyard basin. She swept the floor of the main room. She set out the small wooden bowl of dough she would need for the evening meal. Then she sat down on the stone bench in the courtyard. She did not weep all morning. She would not weep now. But she sat alone in her courtyard for a long time. She looked at the doorway her son had walked out of an hour ago. She looked at the small sleeping mat in the corner of the house, the one she would never again kneel beside to whisper the morning blessing over a boy. She thought about the cave in Bethlehem, the flight to Egypt, the small house she had walked into 13 years ago with a 3-year-old's hand in hers. The first time he had asked her where the stars came from. The morning he had cut his hand in Joseph's workshop. All of those boys were gone. Only the man remained. She did not know yet that she had 18 more years to be his mother before he walked out of her doorway for good. She did not know yet that he would stand on a hillside one day, and feed 5,000. That he would die at 33. That she would outlive him by 30 years. She just knew that her son had turned 13 this morning, and she would never again be the only person in his life. Step back. See what this morning actually was. Every Jewish mother in first century Galilee was going through this same morning every single year, with every single 13-year-old son in every single village. It was the most ordinary morning in the Jewish world. And it was also the most painful morning in every Jewish mother's life. Because every mother who has ever raised a son knows that this morning is coming. The morning your boy is suddenly not just your boy anymore. The morning he belongs to the world. The morning you have to step back. The morning you have to walk behind him instead of in front of him. Mary's morning was no different. Except her son was the Son of God. Her son was going to change everything. Her son was going to die for the world. She didn't know any of that yet on the morning he turned 13. She just knew that her boy was almost gone. And every mother who has ever watched their 13-year-old walk into a school for the first time, or walk into a synagogue, or walk into the world, every mother who has ever felt the strange, invisible loss of a child who is still alive and still in your house, but is no longer entirely yours. Every one of those mothers is doing what Mary did on the morning her son turned 13. She baked the bread. She kissed his forehead. She walked behind him to the synagogue. And then she sat in the courtyard alone and let him go. That is the work of motherhood. That is the work she did every single year of his life. That is the work that built the man who built the church. If this changed how you see Mary, subscribe to the channel. We have a full library of her quietest, hardest, most ordinary days. Tell me in the comments, what hit you hardest? The blessing she whispered over his sleeping head? The honey on the morning bread? The prayer shawl Joseph had been weaving for 6 months in secret? Or the courtyard where she sat alone after they had walked away? I read every comment. I'll see you in the next one.